The hallway stinks. A sour reek of rot and rust. Pale lumen strips buzz and flicker overhead. The walls are flaking rockcrete, adorned with propaganda sheets, warnings and hazard notices, all half-torn and fully ignored. You move in formation, 6 strong, weapons up. A closed fist from Hale halts the line. You stop automatically, stacked just behind him. He nods toward a sealed door hatch 20 meters ahead. You give a tight nod in return, position steady at his shoulder. He waves the squad forward. As you advance, you step over a human shape curled beneath a heat vent, buried under a pile of stained blankets, half asleep or half dead. You care not. A nearby door slides open. You pivot mid-step, Lawbringer rays sighting center mass, but it's just a child. Barefoot, wide-eyed, and clutching a threadbare doll like it might somehow stop the slug you have aimed at her chest. One heartbeat later, a woman's arm, thin, adult, reaches from within the hab and pulls her back. The door seals shut, you pivot back and move on. Above, Hale's Nuncio Aquila glides overhead, wings out, optics scanning, but speakers silent. No sirens, no quotations or recitations, no warnings or declarations. Yet. You reach the door in silence. Then it comes. A tight pulse on the Vox. Breach. You fire a slug through the lock. Via pulls the hatch aside. Mara and Rickon, subductors both, go in first. Shields raised. You and Via follow. Tight arcs, shotguns sweeping. Behind you, the Nuncio Aquila flares to life, shrieking its warnings and reciting promises of lawful retribution. The hab is a filthy single-room unit. One upturned bunk, a cracked sink, and a ceiling leak, both dripping something thick and brown. A pair of charred feet stick out from beneath a torn blanket, and there's a man. Young, crouched in the far corner, raw burn marks visible, hands raised, trembling. Skin pale, eyes wide.
"Don't, please,"
he gasps.
She was...
Mara and Rickon keep shields between him and the rest of you. You and Via cover from behind. You hear Hale's boots approach. He moves in close, positioning himself just behind a locked shields. That means Harkin is on overwatch outside, covering the hallway. Standard containment.
Leos Vor,
Hale says dryly, interrupting the man's frantic mumbling.
You have been judged for transgressions under the Lex Imperialis.
Hale's black-armored form straightens, Voxcaster unnecessarily amplifying his voice in the cramped confines of the hab.
You stand guilty of trifold exposure to a psychic anomaly. You witnessed, were injured by, and survived an unsanctioned warp event. An incident to be classified as a Class B anomalous manifestation, and a violation of the Emperor's law.
There's a small squeak of leather as Hale's gauntlet tightens around the haft of his electro-flail.
You failed to report an incident of unsanctioned psychic manifestation. You failed to report for cognitive purity screening. You failed to initiate preemptive termination as required. You are hereby considered a vector of potential warp-borne contamination, a threat to local stability, and a risk to his Imperium.
The man sways, tears in his eyes. He doesn't speak. You think he might faint.
Worse still, you have also been judged by blood. Beres 4, recorded in 698 M39, conspirator in the Blackwall Uprising, declared guilty of high treason. Though sentence could not be fully enacted in his lifetime, his lineage was flagged for posthumous liability review. That review has since been conducted in full. Judgment follows.
Surprisingly, the man manages a whisper, barely audible.
"I don't even know who that is. I don't..."
Silence, Laxbreaker!
Hale roars, his Vox unit flaring at full gain. The man collapses with a scream, clutching his ears as blood leaks through his fingers.
Sedate and bag him. Transport to ground.
Mara and Rickon move forward. The sedator hisses, magnacles snap shut.
Via.
Hale continues.
Identify the body. Cross-check local registries.
He's already turning.
Harkin. Flag the hab. Category red. Full purge. Leave nothing.
He heads back toward the hallway without pause.
Res,
He calls, not even turning to look at you.
what's next?
As wild as it may seem, there are some stereotypes in the Imperium of Man that are more or less accurate and quite well earned. The Death Guard are, as it stands, quite stinky. The Iron Warriors are very much bitter. The Ultramarines are, well, I'm not going to say the word I'm thinking of, so I'll let you fill in the blanks. But of all the legions, factions, and institutions burdened with exaggeration or mischaracterization, there are perhaps none who so completely reflect the truth of their image as the Adeptus Arbites and their arbitrators. Arbitrators are not negotiators, they are not diplomats or agents of reform. They are not philosophers, peacekeepers, or public servants. They are not interested in social context, moral nuance, or the personal motivations of those who break the Lex Imperialis or the decrees of the Book of Judgement, those who transgress against the Emperor's law. Arbitrators are not here to understand or sympathize, they are here to judge. Warcom has referred to them as bona fide super police, but as the Codex Imperialis 2nd edition details more accurately, the Adeptus Arbites is empowered to enforce law in the Imperium. It is a galactic police force, but armed and equipped as a military force. Its troops, known as arbitrators and judges, are the fighting elite of the Adeptus, a corps of fanatically loyal warriors devoted to the enforcement of government. The authority of the Arbites begins precisely where others end, and then continues, overlapping and extending as far as necessary to enforce the Lex, and as the old Precinct House joke puts it, to keep in check the lawless heretic rabble that passes itself off as the Emperor's worthy subjects. The customs of planetary law, the illusions of local autonomy, the traditions of regional governance, these mean nothing once an arbitrator arrives. Their jurisdiction does not require explanation, and it certainly rarely requires permission. You see, arbitrators are not drawn from planetarian forces, local constabularies, or security forces. They are not selected for their empathy, mediation skills, or for any ability to read a community. Quite the opposite, they are trained to remain detached, immune to the corruption, compromise, and moral decay that inevitably infect local authority. Gordon Rennie's execution hour makes this quite clear. In the eyes of the Arbites, most local law enforcement are nothing but muscle for hire, bribed, bought, politicized, or weak. In contrast, the average arbitrator is brought up in a form of societal isolation. They do not grow up amid the ordinary struggles of civilian life. Instead, they are shaped within the rigid confines of the Scholar Progenium, alongside the likes of commissar cadets and officer candidates, trained from childhood to uphold imperial authority without question and without connection to the messy, complicated truths of everyday human experience. This detachment is no accident, it is actually carefully cultivated, for every element of their training and presentation is engineered to reinforce their separation from those they are tasked to judge and punish, a separation even encoded into the design of their gear. The equipment of the arbitrators is deliberately dehumanizing, its heavy black plate brutalist in design and glossy visors that reflect nothing but the awed fear of the onlooker. To quote Execution Hour once again, the members of the Adeptus Arbites must always appear to the Emperor's subjects as the stern and faceless guardians of the Emperor's law. That facelessness is the point. The average arbitrator is not a man or woman, not a negotiator, not a neighbor, and not a peer. They are law and justice given form. With only a shotgun, a sanction, and the backing of the Adeptus and the Lex, a single arbitrator can, if so ordered, investigate and dismantle a cult, suppress a riot, or quell an uprising, or die trying, satisfied in the knowledge that they upheld the Emperor's law to the bitter end. They answer to no planetary governor, no general, no merchant prince or would-be donor. Their chain of command leads directly to the Grand Provost Marshal, to the High Lords of Terra, to the mouth of the Emperor through the sanctified purity of the Lex Imperialis. They stand outside almost every structure of local authority, their presence a stark reminder that the Lex, the law of the Emperor, supersedes all planetary autonomy and regulation. But this is not to say that the authority of the Arbites is beyond challenge. Their mandate may be sweeping, overridable only by the highest levels of imperial command and that of the Inquisition, but there are always those who consider themselves exempt. Planetary governors, senior officers of the Militarum and the Navy, along with many rogue traders, have all at times sought to resist or sidestep Arbites' intervention with varying degrees of success and consequence. The Hostile Acquisition supplement for the Rogue Trader RPG expands on this point, detailing that the most astute and morally grey rogue traders, trade dynasties and merchant cartels often retain entire teams of legal scholars and contract legates kept on permanent retainer not only to navigate the complexities of the Lex, but to attempt to defend their operations against eager judges should they become spotlighted under Arbites scrutiny. Such jurisdictional conflicts rarely end in clear resolution. They do not produce compromise so much as uncertainty. The chains of command twist into contests of precedence, influence, and power, where law becomes entangled in interpretation, personal pride, and political leverage. However, the Astartes in particular remain a persistent and well-known point of friction. Most within the power structure of the Imperium quietly concede that the Space Marines exist outside conventional legal jurisdiction. The Astartes themselves are rarely inclined to tolerate any external interference in their affairs, and few outside the Inquisition have any realistic hope of forcing their compliance or attention. Yet, whatever the obstacle, whomever the transgressor, the loyalty of the Arbites does not lie solely with any individual or institution. Their allegiance is to something higher, the architecture of the Emperor's law, the survival of the Imperium, and the sanctity of the Lex Imperialis, and what it represents. As Dark Heresy, the Book of Judgement explains, the Adeptus Arbites police the most fundamental of crimes, those that strike at the heart of the Imperium as an institution, at the Imperial Adeptus and the order it represents, and through this at the orderly reign of the Emperor himself. To break the Lex Imperialis is not only to disobey a law of government, it is to violate the immaculate moral order those laws set out. This violation of a divine order is present in every crime the Arbites investigate, and once this is understood, the need for harsh methods and stern penalties becomes clear. For the Arbites, there is no such thing as a petty crime. This is why even the powerful fear them and seek to escape their judgment. The Arbites enforce law and principle. Each arbitrator is a walking verdict, a reminder that law is not a tool of governance, but an extension of the Emperor's will. Law exists to serve him and his Imperium, not necessarily his people. And yet, interestingly, and perhaps inevitably after 10 millennia of amendments, revisions, and additions, the crimes investigated and judged by the Arbites are not always as grand or apocalyptic as one might expect from such rhetoric. The Book of Judgement itself quietly hints at this inconsistency, even attempting to qualify this by later stating it is not the simple physical scale of a crime that decides whether it is a matter for the Arbites or whatever mundane justice system the local governor has seen fit to set up. Rather, it is at whom or what the act was directed. And Yet even this appears to be only half right, as there are many contradictions to examine and consider in order to paint a complete picture. Contrary to a common community misconception that the Arbites only intervene when the Imperial tithe is threatened directly or indirectly, or when a crime is committed against an official, their remit is actually both far broader and far more boring. While the target of an offence certainly matters, especially when it involves sacred institutions or adeptus structures, it is not the sole criteria to influence Arbites' involvement. The Arbites are not necessarily concerned with the scale of a transgression or its target, but with its nature. The Lex exists to preserve not just legal compliance, but the moral and institutional fabric of the Imperium itself. With this in mind, most crimes, no matter how minor they may seem, may in fact be a threat to that sacred order. The law is a divine structure. To break it, even in the smallest way, is to introduce disorder into something meant to be absolute. There is no such thing as a petty offence because every violation chips away at that illusion of control. It is not the magnitude of the act that matters, but the breach in order that it represents. Many of the so-called minor offences have been openly described as falling under Arbites' jurisdiction, with many noteworthy examples to be found within Dark Heresy, the Book of Judgement. Some interesting ones to mention include the act or the intent to commit, witness, or survive an unsanctioned psychic event, the failure or planned failure to confess guilt for a crime, and public acts of desecration, which of course include the example of the poor man who dared to fart while watching a holy procession pass by. The book Crossfire, the first book of the Shira Calpurnia series, even spells out that breaking up queue wars was a regular feature of gate duties in any precinct house. These are not exaggerations or satirical footnotes, they are genuine examples of enforceable offences requiring Arbites' involvement and judgment under Imperial law. A single irregularity can, under Arbites' scrutiny, become the thread that unravels a far deeper conspiracy. Their response is not scaled to the surface offence, but to the implication of disorder. There is no leniency for ignorance, no allowance for context, and no mercy for motive, for to breach the Lex is to tear at the body of the Imperium itself. So when exactly is it appropriate for the Arbites to be involved? Well, whenever they deem it necessary. I do not believe there is a single detailed threshold, and I can find no quote that answers this question without being later contradicted. The Lex Imperialis certainly offers no clear-cut answer because the Lex itself is not clear-cut. It is enormous, self-conflicting, and open to endless interpretation. As Hostile Acquisition spells out, each judge and arbitrator has their own interpretation of the finer points of Imperial law, and each one's view of the Lex Imperialis is different. This is why one arbitrator may ignore a minor act of sedition, while another may declare it grounds for mass arrest or execution. This is not inconsistency, it's the inevitable outcome of a system where contradiction is quite literally built into the foundation. In practice, this means that the reach of the average arbitrator is fluid, and their timing is unpredictable, and their arrival is rarely welcome. But all of this leads us to a deeper question. What exactly is this law that grants the Arbites such sweeping power? What really is the Lex Imperialis and the Book of Judgement, this confusing foundation upon which all imperial justice is supposedly built, and which drives the fanatical devotion of the Arbites? We touched on it already, but the Lex Imperialis, which literally translates to imperial law, is the conceptual bedrock of imperial governance. It is the sacred structure of order that defines, regulates, and enforces loyalty to the Emperor across his million worlds. The Book of Judgement, however, as described in Codex Imperialis, is its living, codified, and expanding body, painstakingly collated over the centuries and embodying every decree ever passed by the High Lords of Terror. As the millennia pass, the Book of Judgment grows ever heavier. Every day, 100 new volumes of encoded holoscript are added to its number. It is not a single book, nor even a series of volumes, but rather it is a dizzying, churning ocean of text, decrees, amendments, and revisions. An unfathomable library of statutes, edicts, precedents, and declarations, many of which may contradict, overlap, or obscure one another. It is a source of knowledge so vast in scope that it is said that the shelves housing its countless volumes rise over 100 meters high, with servitors, scribes, scholars, and clerks tending to its upkeep from gantries and ladders appearing like ants against the endless rows. And it is within this shifting storm of law and doctrine that the average arbitrator must live, operate, and deliver judgment. For this reason, much of an arbitrator's life is consumed not necessarily in direct action, operation, or training, but in study. The ever-evolving body of law which they serve is so dense, so complex, and so tangled that no single arbitrator could ever hope to memorize it in its entirety. Instead, many carry personally annotated extracts, scrolls, or select volumes of key statutes to be revisited constantly in what little downtime their duties permit. Each page destined to become a mess of scribbled footnotes and highlights, personal interpretations written in cramped script between the lines of sacred law. It is therefore the desire of many to be granted the rare honour of study within the Hall of Judgment on Terra itself, where the full weight of the lex through the Book of Judgment is laid bare across its countless vaulted shelves and data crypts. There, under the guidance of the most senior judges, arbitrators may spend years disentangling contradictions, analysing ancient edicts, and committing to memory the ever-shifting framework of imperial law. And this sort of segues us to the key topic of this video: what exactly is life like for the average arbitrator of the Adeptus Arbites? Well, to put it bluntly, it's probably not far from what you're already imagining. Without falling into the impossible task of defining a singular experience across the millions of arbitrators deployed throughout the Imperium, with their endless variations in rank, role, deployment, and experience, we can still identify a few consistent truths and threads that flow throughout. I have found that Arbites' perspectives are very much in line with the stereotype. As such, we must look to the stereotype to form the basis and fill in any gaps with extrapolation. Whether serving as a subductor, breaking riots beneath shock malls and behind raised shields, or as a former vigilant turned wizened judge presiding over trials that stretch across decades, all arbitrators, past, present, and future, live beneath the same simple imperative: enforce the Emperor's law without question. Their methods may differ, their environments will vary wildly, but the weight they carry is the same. Some may work through silence and surveillance, others through gunfire and interrogation, but all are bound by that simple duty to uphold the illusion of an Imperium under control. Every breath they draw is to serve the Lex. Every moment of quiet not dedicated to rest or recovery, rare as it may be, is consumed by review, by training, by study, by preparation. They may be the lone arbiter on a forgotten frontier world, or they may be one among dozens storming the warrens of a hive or watching over the tithe. Some may spend weeks breaking up queue wars at a precinct gate, while others will ride aboard black armoured void ships hunting Lex breakers across the stars. Their methods are flexible, their lives are varied, but their purpose is not. It is a life of vigilance, of absolute detachment. And for the arbitrator, this is not a burden, it is the law. Anyway, thanks for watching. Dystopian Chimp, out.